Hello, welcome back. Last week we dove into one of my passions, which is baking. This week we're going to talk about one of my other passions, which is reading. In 2021, I read 23 books, and today I would like to talk about them. First, I'm just going to go real quick through all the titles. It's not going to be exactly chronological. We'll get into more specific detail later. Trust me. I have pie charts, and bar graphs coming. A collection of major tales and poems from Edgar Allan Poe, Old Man in the Sea by Ernest Hemingway, Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I'm gonna butcher some of these people's names. A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl, Grendel by John Gardner, The Three Musketeers by Alexander Dumas, Tender is the Flesh by Agustina Basterrica, The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck, House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski, Left Behind 1, 2, and 3 by Tim LaHaye and Jerry B. Jenkins, Bag of Bones by Stephen King, Antony and Cleopatra by Shakespeare, The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas, Murders of Molly Southbourne by Tade Thompson, A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain, Secrets of the Secret Place by Bob Sorg, Follow Me to Ground by Sue Rainsford, In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead, The Ritual by Adam Neville, and The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo. Yeah, so I read 23 books, and in total it came out to 8,901 pages. So I have sorted them out by genre. My top read genre is horror, and then historical fiction, and then, believe it or not, Christian literature. Over the months, I read the most in November, coming in at 5 books, and the month I read the least amount of books was September, coming in at 0 books. So my average book length was 387 pages, but I've also grouped them in the 200s, in the 300s, in the 400s, in the 500s, and over. So I read on average 24 pages a day. So I have also categorized them into books that I didn't like, books that I liked, and books that I loved. And this is not like, these books I gave 1 star, these books I gave 3, these books I gave 5. Like, it's just based on how I feel about the book. I don't know how to rate them, but I can tell you if I liked the book or not, and I could probably tell you why. Okay, so I put them into didn't like, loved. So hopefully that'll make sense. So books I didn't like were The Ritual, Old Man in the Sea, and A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. My least favorite read of the year was A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, for it being such an interesting concept. Like, it's about a Connecticut Yankee time traveling to King Arthur's Court for like such an interesting, crazy topic. I found it very boring, unfortunately. So this is my least favorite. And then I feel like I'll get hate for this, at least from my father. Old Man in the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. Thankfully, it was only like 80 pages, because it was boring. Not one of my favorites. Not terrible. Luckily, it's not, over 500 pages, so it's like worth it. Like, you should read it. It's a classic, but just not one of my favorite books I read this year. The Ritual. This book, the first half was really good, and then it just dragged out and went downhill from there. The books that I did like is a lot larger of a selection because these are books I felt middle of the road. The Hunchback of Notre Dame. This book was a roller coaster. The first half of the book was boring, and then we got a good chunk of 100 pages of the plot, and the plot is really good, but then there's another like 50 pages that you don't care about, and then you finish off with the plot. So it was hard to get through. I feel like there was a lot of filler in the book that was unnecessary because the plot was so strong, but there was just a lot of, like, you just talk about the cathedral, like, you just talk about architecture for like 100 pages, and I don't care about that. So the actual plot of what's going on in this book is good. It's a great story. I would have thought the Hunchback, Quasimodo, was going to be a pretty prominent character, because that's the title of the book. And while he is in the story, he's not as big of a character as I would have thought. The topics that it deals with is very interesting because there's Esmeralda, who is like the representation of purity and innocence, and she's like young, she's 16, and then there's Frollo, who is a priest who, despite being a priest, is dealing with these strong, incredibly strong feelings of lust for this girl Esmeralda, who's like underage, and so she's very innocent, very pure. And then there's Frollo, who is like an authoritative figure over her, and he's battling with these very strong emotions of lust towards her, like to the point of it's like, if I can't have you, no one can. So he's like, either I am going to give in to this temptation and this sin with you, you're gonna be mine and we're just gonna roll with it, or I'm gonna let these people hang you. So it's just like, that's what I mean, like the plot itself is so good, but then there's just so much filler about describing the architecture of the cathedral, and I don't care about that nearly as much. I liked the plot for what it was, but it can't be that high up. Like, I wouldn't reread it, like the whole book, because I can't get through all the filler. Tender is the Flesh, I thought was really interesting, a good length. So this is basically a dystopian story about a world where a virus infects all animals and it is no longer safe to eat animals. So instead of the whole world just becoming vegans, they become cannibals, and they create a whole industry on breeding specific humans for butchering and consuming. And it's a lot of interesting conversations and topics are brought up in this story. It's a very unique concept. It is gory and not for the faint of heart, but I find it's very interesting. So I wouldn't recommend it to anybody, because not everyone would like this, but I would recommend it with care. What I did not include in my list of like least favorite to favorite was the two nonfiction. Like, this is definitely nonfiction. I don't know what you classify this as. So I didn't classify these because it's hard to be like, this book is better than The Hunchback of Notre Dame, but worse than The Count of Monte Cristo, because they're just so not on the same level. Like, it's nonfiction, I don't know. They're just so different. And same with this. Like, I feel bad being like, this story about a man recovering and getting through the Holocaust was better than this book about cannibalism. I didn't feel right saying I liked one better than the other, so I didn't try. So I didn't include them, but they're both great. Oh, I keep forgetting. I forgot to mention a book that I read, a whole book that I read. So I forgot to mention, I listened to another book. I also listened to the ebook of How to Win Friends and Influence People. Who's that by? Dale Carnegie? By Dale. See, I know. I don't have it. It was an ebook, an audiobook that I listened to. That I also am not including. That was a self-help book. I'm also not including that in my scale of liked, didn't like, because it was a self-help book. Let's talk about the books that I loved this year. I'm gonna start with House of Leaves. This book is probably the most unique book that I've ever read in my life. It's an interesting format. It's a multimedia. It's a mixed media format, I think that's what it's called. If you've never heard of this book before, basically, it's a story about a man who discovers a movie script about a house that's bigger on the inside than it appears on the outside. So it's very like, it's a story within a story, an interesting read. It's very difficult. Like, this book is not for everybody. It's very difficult to read. It's not a traditional, like, you read front to back. It's very back and forth. You have a story within a story, which can get confusing, and there's a lot of footnotes, and sometimes you have to turn the book upside down. Sometimes, like, you look in through a mirror to read it. It's just, it takes energy and it takes time to get through this book. This is not easy to read. Like, it took me a couple days to even figure out how I wanted to read it, because there are different ways that you could read it. So figuring out what's going on, figuring out the best way to read it for you, takes time and energy, and I get that not everybody wants to do that. Some people would hate it, but I thought it was interesting and fun, so I would recommend it, but not to everybody. In My Dreams I Hold a Knife is one of my favorite books this year. This book was very fun. This book is very easy to read, very easy language, a very, like, kind of classic mystery thriller. Briefly, this book is about a group of college friends, and their senior year, one of them gets murdered, and then and they never solve it, and years later they all come back for a college reunion, and a couple of the friends are set on trying to solve the murder. So it's very twisty and turny. You get a lot of different perspectives, you get plot twists, you get a lot of backstabbing, secrets, lies. It's very dirty. It's not a clean book. The characters in this book you hate. Like, I hate the characters in this book. You don't like them, but you're not supposed to. It's showing, you know, the true colors of people and how not everyone is great. It's very modern, but it's very fun. Like, I read this book in 4 days. Like, I couldn't put it down. I don't think this is all across the board. Everyone will like this story, but it is fun and easy to read. So if you like sort of classic mystery thrillers and annoying college students, then you would like this book. Another one of my favorites this year was Little Women. This one I would definitely reread. I have some notes in here, hang on. This is a beautiful story about this family and their bond that they have. Basically, this was a coming of age story. It follows 4 daughters and their life growing up at home without their father, who's away at war. It's very romantic, it's very traditional, old-timey. It's just a cozy read. It feels really warm and cozy for me. I love this book. I love this book so much. Another one of my favorites this year was The Count of Monte Cristo. This book was super fun. It's basically a revenge story. It's about a young man who gets arrested on the night of his marriage. He's like 18 or 20. He gets arrested on the night of his marriage, falsely accused, and sent away to a prison for 14 years. He gets whisked away on his wedding night and gets put in prison falsely for 14 years, and it's about him getting revenge, basically. It's about him breaking out and him getting revenge on the people who wronged him. And my final favorite of the year was The Three Musketeers. I loved this book, okay? This book I would not have picked up on my own. This was actually a Christmas gift from my father, Christmas of 2020, because this book is described as a swashbuckling historical romance. I don't really like action, so like swashbuckling is not something I would have gone for. Historical, I didn't think I liked, but based on my statistics, I read a lot of historical fiction, but didn't realize that until this year. And then romance, not my go-to. So I would not have picked this book up on my own, but thankfully my father has great tastes in books, and he gave this to me, and it's one of my favorite books I've ever read. This book is so fun. It is so fun. It's just such a good example of like courage and bravery and brotherhood. Like, these musketeers are just, they're in the book, they're called the Inseparables. Like, it's just such a good story about brotherhood, friendship, and trust, and the adventures they go on, and there's love, there's romance, there's plot twists. It's just a really fun story. So now I want to do some superlatives, and these questions I got from my favorite booktuber, Kayla. She's the only booktuber I really watch. So these are just the questions that she answered in one of her videos. I can't answer all of them. Not all of them apply. She read like 180 books. I did not read that many, so I can't answer all of these, but I feel like it'll be fun to answer a couple of them. I'm gonna go through them and answer the ones I can. So one of the questions is my favorite older title that I read. I haven't thought about these yet, because I wanted to answer it like my first impression. My favorite older title that I read. I mean, that's a tie between these two. If I had to pick one, I'm gonna say Little Women. Book that lived up to the hype. It's hard to answer that question because lived up to the hype suggests that I'm in the loop of what is being hyped up, but I'm not. I can't answer book that lived up to the hype. Nobody's hyping these books up for me. I'm picking these books up because they sound interesting to me. My biggest reading accomplishment. My biggest reading accomplishment would probably have to be House of Leaves because of its weird format. Favorite character? Oh my gosh. My favorite character has to be Athos in Three Musketeers. He's one of the Musketeers. He's my favorite. I would marry Athos, but anyway. Least favorite character? Any of the people in this book. Any of them. They all suck. Book with the most surprising moment. I'd have to say this one again, because this one was a mystery thriller, so it had a significant plot twist. The book I'll be recommending the most is probably Three Musketeers. These are all gonna be the same books, but It is what it is. Favorite cover? I'd have to say my favorite cover would be Follow Me to Ground or Old Man in the Sea. These are just very nice to look at. Book that made you cry the most? I don't think any of these books made me actually cry, but a book that made me sad was probably Little Women. Book that made me laugh the most? Honestly, I feel bad because I'm just saying the same book over and over again, but The Three Musketeers, this book, it's just the writing. The writing is so good, which also answers, there's another question on here that says favorite writing of the year. Like, this is just written so well, and it's not like a satire book. This book probably made me laugh the most. This is my favorite writing of the year. So again, Three Musketeers. It's I guess Three Musketeers is my favorite book this year. I don't know. I'll probably have to reread it. And that's all the questions that I can answer. So that is all the books that I have read in 2021. It was overall, I'd say, a pretty successful reading year. I enjoyed most of what I read. Very excited for all the upcoming reads. If you have read any of these books, I would love to hear about it. I have a lot of things I could say about these books, but trying to keep it a condensed video. So if you've read any of these books or are interested in any of these books, I'd love to hear about it. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.